I'm Mark Dawson from the Self-Publishing Show, and this is Self-Publishing Spotlight, where we shine a light on the indie authors who are changing the world of publishing, one book at a time.
Hello and welcome to the Self-Publishing Spotlight. We meet indie authors at all stages of their careers and ask them a series of 5 questions. 5 questions about their process, their mistakes and their successes. 5 answers that will help you level up your own author career. My name's Tom Ashford and I'm part of the Self-Publishing Formula. Don't forget that you can get your self-publishing resource kit at selfpublishingformula.com/starter kit. This week's guest is Karen Inglis. She's written 7 children's books and she lives in the UK. Welcome, Karen.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. Some people may recognise your name if they came to the Self-Publishing Show live event a few weeks ago, because you're on one of the panels, 1,000 times 100k authors, I think.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, but for those who didn't attend, would you like to introduce yourself and talk about the 7 children's books that you've written?
Yes. So I'm Karen Inglis. I live in London, UK. I've been self-publishing since 2011. And yes, as you say, I've got 7 children's books out now. 3 of those are picture books. I then have a short chapter book for ages 6 to 8, and then 3 short middle grade novels for sort of ages 7 to 11, 2 of which are illustrated, and one of which is not illustrated. That's called The Secret Lake. And so that's the extent. By accident rather than design, I write across all age groups. That wasn't intentional, but we'll probably be talking about my writing methods as to why that happened. And I suppose the big thing quite a few people have now heard is the fact that one of my books, The Secret Lake, became a bestseller in the last couple of years. So it's now sold over 100,000 copies, actually, which is in print, which is quite quite uplifting. Yeah, that sounds amazing. Okay, well, question number 1 is, why do you write? So I guess that's, why did you want to write in the first place, and why did you choose children's books? Right, so in terms of why do I write, because I've been writing for a lot longer than I was writing children's books. In a way, I'm not sure, but all I do know is I've always had the urge to write and to tell my story. So when I was little, I kept lots of diaries. I had pen friends back in the day. I had a pen friend in Africa. I had another one in the north of England and another one in France when I was quite young. And I still remember my first ever essay I wrote when I was about age 5 or 6, probably 6, when we'd all been down to Spain on holiday, and it was called The Journey, and I remember it went on and on and on. So I've always liked, there's just something in my DNA that likes writing things. And my whole, my business career up until I was writing for children was actually professional writing for the financial services industry, to cut a long story short. So it's in my DNA, and when I had my children, that then translated into me, after reading children's books to them, suddenly thinking, actually, there are stories around, that some of these stories aren't as, some are great and some are not so great. And then stories started coming to me.
So did you want to be indie published from the beginning, or did you look for traditional publishing first?
Well, way back, in around 2000 even, I want to say 2000, it was, very early on, when I first started writing children's stories, I did send off manuscripts to traditional publishers. Those were in the days, when you sent it by post and you waited for 6 weeks for something to come back. And it was the usual thing of a 6-week to 12-week wait, and then a brown envelope coming back saying thanks but no thanks. And so after doing that for a while, and my children were getting to school age, I just thought, actually, this is never going to get anywhere. And I just put everything back in my box in my office and went back to my day job for 10 years. And it was only when I took a sabbatical from work for a year in 2010 that I pulled the stories out again and started looking at them and thinking, actually, these are not bad at all. And when I then investigated what I could do about finding agents and publishers again, I discovered the world of self-publishing, mostly over in America. And I very quickly made the decision that I was not even going to try to get traditionally published after that. Yeah. Because I was a professional writer, I've been working in web design for government and stuff. And I suppose I had that sort of confidence, but it was finally giving me that control that I really wanted. That I've been so frustrated not to have before, because I did investigate trying to get books printed myself back in the day, and it was just not viable. So no, latterly, definitely, I did not seek traditional publishers.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, question number 2 is, how do you write? So do you tend to plot the stories out first, or just sort of see where they take you?
Well, I interestingly, with The Secret Lake, I didn't plot at all. I just saw where the story took me, and I learnt the hard way with that. Even though it ended up being a fantastic book, I probably have something like 50 drafts of it, if I'm honest, and I keep going back and looking at them all. And particularly because it was time travel and historical novel and so on. But I learnt from that, and going forward, I have plotted, done an outline, and the way I do that is I always do it pen and paper first, and bullet points or whatever. And once I feel I've got the sort of outline of a plot, I suppose I would then move to my computer, and there I will be usually writing in Word. I did try Scrivener, but it didn't really work with me. I do have a grown-up novel in the drawer, which I may come back to, which is plotted out using Scrivener, but I'm in two minds about it. You know how it is. It's just one of those things. People work in different ways.
Yeah.
So yes, the plotting, plotting on pen and paper, then moving to Word, and then with picture books, there's another element to it, which is, you'll come up with the story, and then you've then got to get it to flow over usually 32 pages. And that, in order for that to really test that out, once I'm pretty happy with the story, I will actually create a physical mock-up of the book and place the words on it. And in fact, I'm at that. I've come to that stage recently on a picture book I'm just working on with an illustrator friend, and it was getting the physical mock-up to make sure that the page turns worked. That was my sort of final step in the planning and plotting stage, and she's now working on the draft illustrations. So yes, variety of methods.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of work goes into it. What's the is there a lot of difference between the picture books and the chapter books and things like that in terms of your approach?
In terms of my approach, to plotting, or just to writing the story, or
I guess just generally, what sort of changes are there in terms of I guess in terms of plotting and in terms of just how you approach the story?
Oh, I see. Well, in terms of the story, in a way, it's the same principle, that there's got to be a good beginning, a good middle, and a good end, and something has to change during the story, and character, whether that's a character going through an emotional change or other things, and keeping the interest going. And so I suppose in the way that you want in a chapter book, you want every chapter to sort of to end on a cliffhanger, so that the child wants to go carry on reading, in the same way that you want them to get to the end of the page and want to carry on reading. Yes, you want them to get to the end of the chapter and carrying on reading, and then you want them to read the whole book and then hopefully read more of your books. It's just the same with picture books. My last picture book, The Christmas Tree Wish, it's only, that's quite long for picture books. It's 780 words or something. Okay. But getting that story to work was a huge, it was a huge effort to make it work within the length of the story. And so the approach isn't different in a way, and in some ways it's no easier whether it's a picture book or a full-size middle-grade novel. It's just that it takes less time if it's a picture book, ultimately.
Yeah. Okay. Question number 3 is, are you a full-time author? If you are, how did you get there? And if you aren't, what steps are you taking to make it happen?
Well, I am a full-time author in that I would say 95% of my time when I'm at my desk and in my office is all to do with being an author. but a lot of that time, I can't do it full time. Put it this way, I can't do it 40 hours a week because I have things that I know this sounds very strange. I have a bad back, so I absolutely, typically when we're not in quarantine, have to go to the gym every day, and that takes out quite a lot of time. So I've had a slip disc in the past. So sitting and for long periods of time, and even now I have a standing desk so I can change my position. It just doesn't suit me. I have to get out of the house. So that normally will mean I'm gone for 2.5 hours in the morning, but by the time I've gone out, come back, have my shower and so on. So that sort of eats into my time. Although I do, by the way, when I'm at the gym, listen to podcasts, self-publishing formula and all the rest of them. I'm always learning or reading. But apart from that, I am writing, but in terms of being an author, that again doesn't take up, it's not something I do every single day because I have so much business stuff to be getting on with in terms of whether that's organising school visits, carrying out school visits, doing the admin after the school visits. I'm also constantly keeping up to date with what the latest courses are that are available, or how to do things well in terms of advertising, new tools that are available, and just managing my ads. A lot of that, and more lately translations. So I suppose the answer to the question is I am a full-time author but that encompasses a lot more than writing.
Yeah, it's a full business.
And I have to be fair, I enjoy the mix, but I would still wish I had more time to write. And I keep saying to myself, if I didn't have to spend 2.5 hours out, always making sure my back doesn't go into spasm, perhaps I would do more sitting down and actual writing than I do. But that said, the way I write is I don't sort of have a production line of books that I know I want to write. Stories come to me. And so, all of my stories, from The Secret Lake to my Ferdinand Fox stories, to the Christmas Tree Wish, the one I brought out at Christmas, they were all based on things I saw, and they kept going around in my head, and I knew I had to write the story. And the latest one, which I'm just saying to you, I've just mocked up and I'm working with the illustrator again. That's another example. It's something I saw probably 1.5 years ago, been going around in my head, couldn't quite work out what the story was going to be until I then read something else in a Facebook group that was totally unrelated to what I'd seen, but suddenly the two came together, and actually very quickly. And so that one's sort of underway at the moment. So it's full time, but in a sort of haphazard kind of way, in a way.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, well, question number 4 is, what mistakes do you think you've made, and what have you got right?
Okay, mistakes I've made, and I'm sure most authors will tell you the same thing when they first started out. The biggest one was probably typos in my book. I mean, I did use editors early on, and I would always recommend that. But once the book came and I got my proof, I proofread it. A colleague who's a business writing friend, but very, very, and had also helped me work on the book with an editorial role, she proofread it. My mother, who's an eagle eye, proofread it. But still, the first run of the first sort of lot of print on demands of The Secret Lake, to my horror, I discovered, I don't know, they probably had about 30 typos in it that somehow none of us had caught. And around that time, I also had made some bookmarks that I was giving out at local bookshops when I was taking in the consignment deliveries. And there was a typo on the bookmark. And I just spent something like £80 on these bookmarks. I remember sitting on the bus, suddenly reading and thinking, oh my God, that's £80 just completely wasted. And, you live and learn. And in some ways, I think you do learn from those mistakes. So yes, proofing. The other thing I did wrong in the early days, although again, you have to do things wrong to learn from them. I wasted quite a bit of money, not horrible money, certainly not horrible money. I did waste quite a lot of money on Facebook ads in the early days. This is before really only in the very early days of when the courses were available. But, to this day, I've not really made them work for children's books, but I will be going back because I am determined to see if I can make them work. But that was the other sort of mistake I made, and I just think that Amazon ads seem to be a better place for children's authors to advertise.
Yeah.
So so there we go. Those were my main ones. And in terms of what I've done right, I would say right from the get-go, I have always done a lot of research and learning about the self-publishing process, and that's always given me confidence, and it's really helped me do things well. I think I'm a bit of a stickler for detail on those sorts of things. So back in the early days, before self-publishing had really taken off in 2011, I spent a huge amount of time in what was called the Create Space forums, talking to formatters, learning out, because in those days the tools didn't exist that we now have that make life so much easier, such as Vellum. But that, and I continue to do that learning and studying now around Amazon ads, Facebook ads. Even though I'm not doing them, I'm constantly looking at courses around them, because I do want to come back and master them. So that's one thing I've done that's right. Joining the Alliance of Independent Authors is something I to this day, think was a great thing to do, because I found my tribe. I think this was pre-self-publishing formula days. We've also obviously now got the whole SPF community as well. Yeah. So that was that. Safe places, to get together with people who are like-minded. The other things I did right, I think, from the early days, is, which everyone will all agree with, is using an editing service. So even in the very early days, again, back when I first wrote The Secret Lake, there was a service I used called the Writers Advice Centre for Children's Books. And they were trailblazers actually in their day. And they would do a manuscript appraisal. It was not with a view to being an agent or anything like that. You paid them, and they, the people who work there have a strong industry in children's publishing. So they gave me some great advice in terms of The Secret Lake and things I was getting wrong with the early drafts. I've since used Readsy for one of my books. Other couple of things I've done right. I've produced an audio book last summer, and I did get, and I still have sitting in a box behind me in my office, the equipment to do it myself, but I realised that I was just never going to get round to it, and that the quality probably wouldn't be right. So I outsourced the production and went and paid to sit in a studio in Brixton, and I'm so glad I did, because even though at the time it felt like quite a lot of money, that has earned itself back now, and the production is got, it went very well. So but that I could afford to do that then. So I will only really I will invest, but you have to be careful. And then probably just the other thing is, what I've done right is writing from the heart, and believing in, and knowing that, the stories that I truly believe in are the ones that I'm writing about, and not giving up on them. If the evidence says that they're popular, don't give up on them. You have to just keep making sure that you've got to work on how to target them to find the right audience, and that's where all the research comes in. So, long answer.
Oh, that's good. Well, I mean, it all led to you selling, was it 100,000 print copies of a single book? So that's
yeah. I mean, it might even be more by now. But yes, The Secret Lake has sold 100,000 copies now, and it had sold. I mean, to give you an idea in terms of my determination, it had sold 7,000 copies by the end of 2000. And I'm trying to get this right. I think it was the end of 2017. I'd already sold 7,000 print copies, and probably 90% or 85% of those sales was at events, because in those days, before Amazon ads really took off or came about for us, that was the main way you could sell children's books, because if you weren't well known, even though Amazon was there and the books were on there, the chances of somebody finding your book on there were quite remote, because you didn't have that word of mouth PR behind you. Now, what Amazon ads did when they came along in 2018 was, in the UK, they suddenly put my book in front of people, because I was able to advertise against books that were like mine, and the world changed after that. Yeah. So yes, and then and really, because I'd known, I always remember the schools saying to me, "It's such a lovely book," and blah blah blah. And I thought, well, if these women, if these teachers in the schools are saying so, it's got to be a good book. What a shame more people can't find it. But So if you're getting that sort of feedback on your book, I would just say, don't give up. Yeah.
Okay, fifth and final question is, what's your final piece of advice for authors starting out in indie publishing?
So probably I'm going to repeat myself a bit here. So I would first of all say write from the heart.
Yep.
I would secondly say, and this is kind of at a granular level, but it's something we all know, leave your story to rest after you've written it. Don't sort of think, oh, I've written it now, I'm going to go off and get people to look at it and get all excited about publishing it. Leave it for a week, 2 weeks, however long it is. Go back and reread it, because you're bound to find that it's not as good as you thought it was, or you've got ways to improve it. After that, then test it with readers, appropriate to your target market, preferably not readers you know. And then after that, that's the point at which you must use some sort of an editor, somebody who's qualified to give you professional feedback on the book.
Yeah.
And don't publish until you're sure the story is the best that you can make it. And I think one knows when it's not. And and although it's never going to be perfect, you do know when it's not quite right. And just don't kid yourself. You've just got to wait until it's right. And then 2 more things. Invest in learning, whether that's investing your time in learning about self-publishing and the process. And there's so much free information out there now. It's unbelievable. And paid courses, of course, and Facebook groups. And then finally, the last piece of advice is help other people and share what you know, because I do believe that, giving, if you give you get as good as you give, in a way. And I've always, literally from the first day I started self-publishing, I've got a blog called selfpublishingadventures.com, and that's pretty much where I recorded everything I was doing, as much for my benefit as for other people's. But, I had been so happy to get advice from other people for free. I wanted to then share what I was learning. And I have since now got a non-fiction book out, but the blog is also there. And it's good to share what you know. We can all learn together.
Yeah, it's a big and friendly self-publishing community out there.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, those are your 5 questions. Thank you very much for coming on.
My pleasure. And yes, happy quarantine.
Yes. Let's hope we get through.
It's a big day of the lockdown today, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll get that grown-up novel written in the next few months. You never know.
Yeah. All right. Good luck and stay healthy.
And you. Take care. Thanks very much, Tom.
That's it for this week's Self-Publishing Spotlight. Don't forget that you can get your free self-publishing resource kit at selfpublishingformula.com/starter kit. And if you want to appear as a guest on this show, send us brief details about yourself and your writing at selfpublishingformula.com/spotlight-guest. I'm Tom Ashford, and I'll see you again next week.